Casey and Judro, two children sitting trembling in the dark room, holding each other tightly in fear. Despair was etched in their eyes. They had just experienced something beyond imagination. Both faces were filled with tears. Their dazed and panicked eyes were clear evidence. They were witnesses to the terrible event that had just occurred. The murderer tightly gripped the electric cord in his hand, his movements cold and indifferent. Those cords not only bound the bodies but also became chains weighing heavily on the memories of the two children. In the darkness, he silently executed Casey and Judro's parents. The two children helplessly watched the scene unfold before their eyes, unable to run away or stop it. Despite being pushed into the ultimate horror, Casey still retained some clarity. She stood up, her eyes shining with determination, not to run, but to fight. Her small hand reached for the bundle of weapons in the corner of the room. In fear, the survival instinct rose stronger than ever. They would not die silently. Casey and Judro together charged to attack the murderer. Though just children, they poured all their remaining strength into avenging their parents. That bloody moment changed everything. The twisted smile, the blank white eyes, their minds were forever distorted by this early tragedy. A system notification appeared before Jinhyuk, revealing the conditions to copy the skill. Comprehensive sharing. He would have to satisfy the distorted thirst of the two children. Before Jinhyuk could react, the now-grown Casey and Judro rushed forward like deadly whirlwinds. Their blood-soaked past had turned them into cold predators. Jinhyuk unleashed a powerful whirlwind of sword energy, creating a vortex that shook the entire space. This was not only a preemptive strike but also a declaration of the strength of a superior being. He calmly blocked the attacks from the twins, his eyes unwavering. In his mind, he analyzed their speed, strength, and coordination, a combination not to be underestimated. Jinhyuk tilted his head to dodge, his sharp gaze clearly showing amusement. He admitted they were quite impressive, a rare compliment from someone who always held the initiative. Seizing the opportunity, Jinhyuk delivered a precise spinning kick, hitting both opponents directly. Every movement of his was fast, strong, and without any openings. Instead of fear, the twins smiled brightly. In their eyes, Jinhyuk was not someone to avoid, but the ideal prey for their obsessive thirst for battle. Undeterred, Casey rushed forward, spinning her weapon like a whirlwind, while Judro stepped up to attack from below. The twins began coordinating in their signature style, overwhelming with speed and perfect synchronization. Judro tightly gripped the black knife handle, emitting a dark aura. He smiled eagerly and declared war. The fight was not over, and they wanted to continue to the end. With skilled movements, Casey quickly combined two mysterious items. Black energy rose like smoke, signaling a special skill about to be activated. The twins' skill was officially activated. The twins shared the same type of weapon, doubling their power. Brilliant blue light radiated from the two blades, signaling an intense upcoming assault. Approaching, Judro laughed wildly and invited Jinhyuk to take a hit just once. With a strange desire, he admitted being attracted by the opponent's scent of blood to the point of wanting to feel it firsthand. Jinhyuk silently gasped, realizing his body had reached its energy limit. Though exhausted, he nodded in agreement to continue the battle, showing his inherent resilience and coldness. In a solemn hall, members of the Empire gathered to congratulate Sir Fenheimer, who had just achieved an important strategic victory. Words of congratulations continued to ring out as everyone emphasized Fenheimer's contribution in recruiting Jinhyuk. Although he was humble, everyone implicitly understood this was a major turning point. In an atmosphere filled with praise, the Empire's nobles concluded that attracting Jinhyuk would be the decisive card for controlling the middle levels of the tower. Separated from the crowd, Moangsu silently observed with angry eyes. He bitterly admitted his mistake in ever thinking reconciliation was possible, especially after witnessing the presence of that ancient one. The name Moangsu echoed in his mind, a bitter reminder of failure and broken trust between two opposing forces. Stepping into the shadows, Moangsu did not hesitate to summon an evil entity, Blood Phantom. His voice rang coldly, signaling that a conspiracy had begun to move. Blood Phantom, the embodiment of darkness and chaos, was surprised that a righteous man like Moangsu sought him out. The two entered a dangerous agreement in absolute secrecy. Without beating around the bush, Blood Phantom inquired about the target to be eliminated. Was it Jinhyuk, who had now been recruited by the Empire? His eyes flashed with delighted killing intent. Moangsu did not choose Jinhyuk but aimed at those who followed him. He believed that eliminating them would pave the way for a more precise strike against the enemy he had yet to control. The sinister shadow agreed to the assassination request but reminded Moangsu of the organization's rules. This action clearly exceeded the allowed limits. Nevertheless, since the target was unimportant to him, the only remaining issue was the price. Moangsu said nothing, silently responding with a cold, knife-like glare, clearly indicating that the previous warning should not be repeated again. Under the invisible pressure from the powerful old man's gaze, Blood Phantom was forced to retract his mocking expression, forced a smile, and hastily reassured that he was only confirming the deal. As the assassin melted into the darkness, Muangsu hissed with contempt, deeply embedding his disdain for those who lived outside rules and morality. Heavy footsteps echoed down the long corridor as Muangsu calculated the risks. If Kong Jinhyuk truly sided with the Empire, then he himself, the one who once challenged him, would soon become the most disadvantaged. With utmost determination and no other choice, Muangsu drew out a strange glowing object, a last resort tool in case he needed to eliminate the threat at its root with his own hands. Meanwhile, outside the battlefield where noise had not ceased, a figure silently dashed at high speed, signaling an imminent explosion of events ahead. The armed twins combined forces to unleash fierce continuous attacks, each blue sword slash tearing through the air as if wanting to rip apart the space around their target. The violent collision cracked the ground beneath from the force of both strikes, proving the true power of their newly combined weapon, along with the rare synchronization between the twin warriors. Amidst the flashing light in his cold eyes, Kong Jinhyuk activated the skill King's Step Sword, silently declaring that from now on, he would control the game. The skill Soul Absorption was activated, producing sharp slashes. Two powerful attacks from Jinhyuk's teammates not only defeated the enemy but also allowed him to absorb spiritual energy, permanently increasing mana by 0.03, a small but extremely valuable prize in a draining battle sequence. Anomalies spread as the two enemies sensed something strange escaping from their bodies. Their expressions turned insane. With abnormal pleasure, they were enjoying the pain, revealing their distorted nature and pathological psychology after being affected by the soul skill. Unable to tolerate that sick excitement, Jinhyuk unleashed a thunderous punch, striking both in the face. His action was decisive and showed deep hatred for that twisted cruelty. Jinhyuk's strike caused a violent collision explosion, sweeping both enemies into the wall. The floor cracked wide, dust and debris flying thickly, the aftermath of the rightful fury of a powerful being. Sighing helplessly, Jinhyuk thought of the skill, Absolute Sharing, an option that could help him lighten the load. But for now, he still had to face a reality, continuing to indulge his frenzied teammates if he wanted to maintain his current advantage. After the devastating blow, the two enemies still stood up, grinning with heightened battle spirit. Though knowing they were at a disadvantage, they were excited by Jinhyuk's power, a signal that this fight was far from over. Jinhyuk began to lose patience. Though just starting, he realized that facing these berserk fighters was wasting his precious time. With cold eyes, he decided to end everything quickly. Just as he was about to deliver a finishing blow, Jinhyuk suddenly stopped. Something made him hesitate, an unexpected reaction from the two enemies, completely different from their earlier frenzied fighting attitude. Jinhyuk saw both enemies kneeling before him. No battle spirit remained, no smirks, only absolute resignation. He asked coldly but had already somewhat anticipated their answer. Their voices rang out honest and desperate. They admitted the harsh truth that even combining all their strength they could not defeat Kong Jinhyuk, and so they chose to bow their heads. The pair of mutant assassins, originally sent to kill Jinhyuk, unexpectedly changed their attitude. With innocent faces but eyes full of calculation, they expressed that if they could not kill someone with such sweet blood, they would rather be accepted as family. Jinhyuk froze, his face stiff with shock. Faced with the unbelievable proposal from two former assassins, he could not immediately react, only silently staring at the two children with extremely strange expressions. Not allowing himself to be exploited, Jinhyuk coldly activated the skill Mark of Obedience. The two mutants immediately trembled in fear, their nerves suppressed by the power of the mark. Their eyes shifted to fear and dependence. At that moment, the system announced that Jinhyuk had met the conditions to copy the skill Complete Sharing. This rare ability allowed him to share skills, emotions, and even memories temporarily with team members. Jinhyuk carefully read the newly copied skill list. Meanwhile, the two mutants jumped joyfully behind him as if granted a new chance at life, completely contrasting with the previous battle atmosphere. In a humorous chibi frame, Jinhyuk was clung to on both sides by his two reluctant adopted children. Both declared in unison, "We are family from now on, forever, until death." Jinhyuk was completely powerless and resigned to his ironic fate. Jinhyuk sighed in despair, his dark expression showing frustration. Although he had just made a new contract and gained two subordinates, the way they clung to him made him feel as if he had taken on an additional mental burden. While Jinhyuk was still busy with his new family, another group quietly entered the ruined area. Three familiar figures appeared, Teresa, Chunhwa, and Alice, searching for Jinhyuk's whereabouts after the chaotic battle. Teresa asked directly, "Where is Jinhyuk?" But Chunhwa shook her head helplessly, and Alice calmly walked ahead. No one had any clue about the current whereabouts of the person they were looking for. With cold eyes and an arrogant tone, Alice asked again, "So where do we go now?" The answer made everything even more ambiguous. "Don't know." The three continued forward, each carrying their own goal. In a surge of pent-up anger, Kim Jae-tae screamed in despair, trembling before a power beyond comprehension. Teresa tried to hold him, whispering comfort, but could not extinguish the fear deep within. Although unable to pinpoint Jinhyuk's exact location, Alice sensed something vague yet certain. Teresa looked at her suspiciously, while Alice's gaze remained distant, fixed ahead. A faint magical energy, like an invisible thread, extended from Alice, a strange trace connecting her and Jinhyuk. She closed her eyes, focusing on the guiding flow from afar, silently following the destined path. Suddenly, Alice pointed forward, a confident smile appearing on her face. She asserted that as long as they followed that direction, they would find Jinhyuk. The group's eyes gradually brightened. However, just as hope flickered, a dark voice suddenly echoed through the air, stunning the group. Jae-tae and Teresa simultaneously turned around, immediately entering a state of alert. From the shadows, a stranger appeared holding a spear. His cold gaze and the twisted black aura surrounding him instantly made the atmosphere tense and suffocatingly dangerous. Not allowing them to advance any further, a powerful stomp hit the ground accompanied by a cold declaration. The enemy had officially revealed themselves, determined to block all attempts to approach Jinhyuk. The leader of the Blood Phantom faction, Yomo, officially appeared. He gripped his large spear tightly, with ghosts screaming around him like calls of death. His arrival signaled that a fierce battle was about to begin. Recognizing the danger level, Jae-tae immediately drew his weapon and ordered Alice to fall back. Teresa also took a defensive stance beside them, her eyes resolute, ready to fight to protect her comrades. Though trying to appear calm, Alice was deeply worried inside. She clearly felt the magic within her body weakening, a clear sign that the distance between her and Jinhyuk was growing ever greater. As the group walked through the dilapidated corridor, Casey excitedly rummaged through his memory to recount a bloody incident he had caused. Recalling a particular detail, the thigh, Casey cheerfully confirmed, recounting how he once stabbed an enemy's thigh with an iron spike, shattering his bones. The story was both gruesome and innocent, creating a strange atmosphere. Jinhyuk remained silent, clearly feeling his vitality draining as the two new members in the group kept babbling about brutal stories. Stopping in the middle of the corridor, Jinhyuk suddenly called both Casey and Judro over, declaring that they were now family, a binding condition accompanied by rules soon to be established. With a half-smile, Jinhyuk introduced the first rule. From now on, they were not allowed to kill people arbitrarily. As he finished speaking, the brand of obedience skill was activated, setting the new rule. Casey and Judro immediately objected. They did not understand why they had to follow rules when they themselves were players beyond the law. Jinhyuk put his hand on his head, sighing as if troubled by these murderous kids, then quietly thought of a more effective response plan. Switching to a calm tone, Jinhyuk proposed a compromise. He would designate the bad guys in the future, and Casey and Judro could deal with them in their own way as long as it was the right target. The marking skill was activated again, recording the new rule. The two young assassins cheered as if they had just received a great privilege. While Casey and Judro happily frolicked like children receiving gifts, Jinhyuk turned away and silently thought, "Thank heavens they are that simple." As the group relaxed in the ancient corridor, Jinhyuk suddenly stopped, sensing something unusual. Behind him, Casey and Judro were still happily practicing, unaware of the approaching danger. Jinhyuk's sharp eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing through the darkness ahead. He clearly sensed the presence of approaching enemies. Activating the sword steps of the King's skill, Jinhyuk dashed forward at a terrifying speed that cracked the ground. Casey and Judro immediately reacted, hastily chasing after him with worried expressions. In another corner, a group of masked strangers charged forward simultaneously. They carried sharp weapons, raised them full of killing intent, and shouted their attack command in unison. Facing the wave of attack, an elegant figure in a black dress appeared. It was Teresa. She stood still like the eye of a storm, confronting the incoming sword thrust. Teresa immediately activated the divine reinforcement skill, enhancing her warrior body. A dazzling golden light enveloped her like a reincarnated holy warrior. Then she continued to deploy the Divine Shield skill. A large holy shield radiated brilliant light, forming a wall of light protecting both her and Alice behind her. With determined eyes, Teresa turned and shouted loudly at Alice, ordering her to stay away from the danger zone. Courage and protective instinct surged fiercely. Without delay, an enemy launched an attack using the soul-chasing sword energy skill. Cold sword energy swirled through the space, slashing horizontally and vertically like the scythe of death. The man with a cold face did not miss his chance. His sharp gaze and fierce aura radiated from every step. Clearly, he was a formidable opponent about to enter a life-or-death battle. In a tense moment, two swords clashed violently, producing a deafening clang. Jinhyuk and the demon-faced leader gripped their sword hilts tightly, their eyes unwavering as they unleashed their full power in the opening strike. The enemy was surprised to discover that Jinhyuk, an outsider, used soul-chasing swordsmanship and ancient distinctive skill. His voice carried amusement but also suspicion about the true identity of his opponent. Ignoring identity, Jinhyuk decisively counterattacked with fiery eyes, bluntly declaring that he had no need to reveal his name to someone like that. The sword flashed, clearly showing his unwavering determination. The enemy retreated, releasing more subordinates to surround Jinhyuk. He smirked provocatively, thinking he had the upper hand, but he had no idea he was facing a monster who had yet to reveal his true power. Jinhyuk paused for a moment upon hearing the provocation. Instead of getting angry, he let out a cold laugh and summoned a special skill, Sword Song. Flashing blades appeared, wrapping around his body like a deadly sword symphony. At that moment, a teammate of Jinhyuk appeared behind him. He had intended to save this thunderous strike for another enemy, but given the current situation, he had to unleash his strongest damaging move, lightning flashing from the sword he tightly gripped. The enemy laughed loudly, showing disdain for Jinhyuk's group's seriousness. He thought this was just their final act before the weaker ones collapsed, but the trembling behind him had already begun to creep in. Though never having fully mastered the skill, Jinhyuk gave his all, firmly gripping the sword hilt emitting electric sparks. It was a silent vow that he would use everything he had, even if it meant surpassing his own limits. Unleashing his power, Jinhyuk soared into the air, his body and sword merging into the move Soul-Chasing Sword Dance. United body and sword. The sword energy swept across the space, creating rings of light that tore through darkness and threatened to annihilate all enemies below. The enemies screamed in despair as their bodies were torn apart by sharp sword energies. Jinhyuk's powerful attack reversed the situation, proving why he was known as someone not to be underestimated. Teresa watched the scene in amazement, her heart swelling with pride and admiration. She could not hide her astonishment at the power radiating from Yuzeong, who was fighting valiantly on the front lines. Yomo spoke calmly and authoritatively, acknowledging that his opponent had reached the realm of unity of man and sword, but immediately after, he delivered a ruthless blow as if to assert absolute superiority. Under the activation of the Blood Phantom Spear skill, Yomo swung his blood-red weapon fiercely, charging with devastating power and overwhelming the enemy with an attack carrying invisible killing intent. He wore a sinister smile, praising his opponent's excellent skill while coldly emphasizing, "But the one dueling you is me," a bloody declaration of power and arrogance. The battle continued under relentless pressure. Yuzeong was pushed into a difficult position. Despite his defensive efforts, he could not fully withstand the opponent's strength. Blood began to trickle from the corner of his mouth. With blazing red eyes and full of killing intent, Yuzeong bled as he endured the recent attack. The pain tore through his chest, but his gaze never left the enemy before him. Knocked down, Yuzeong's body collapsed onto the cold stone floor. Although still clutching his sword, his will was suppressed by the overwhelming pressure from the evil technique just used. Yomo looked down at his dying opponent with feigned regret, uttering bitter words. "If you had reached that realm on your own, perhaps you would have had a bright future." Raising his weapon high, Yomo prepared to deliver the finishing blow. He appeared regretful about killing a young genius, but the cruel smile on his lips revealed his pleasure in the execution. Just as the spear tip was about to strike down, holy light from the sign of the cross skill exploded in the air, stopping Yomo's finishing move. Teresa appeared like a ray of hope. After the lightning-fast attack, Yuzeong collapsed to the ground in a kneeling position, dust covering the stone floor. The power gap between him and the giant enemy was becoming increasingly clear. Yomo, with overwhelming momentum, looked down at his opponent with disdain. He tightly gripped the fiery spear filled with evil energy, casually mocking the power he considered troublesome. Teresa, standing afar, watched the situation with worry. She understood that bringing holy power into this dark land was courageous but also very risky. Jinhyuk, though injured and exhausted, gritted his teeth and endured. In his eyes burned an unyielding will as he asserted that the enemy had made a grave mistake by dragging the battle here. Alice appeared with a cold aura and graceful figure in a black dress, facing the enemy. She spoke as a warning. The others should have continued protecting the child instead of rushing into battle. Seeing Alice retreating all this time, Yomo smiled slyly. He thought she was not good at fighting, only good at observing someone not to be feared. However, Alice's ice-cold gaze said otherwise. Without needing words, that demeanor was enough to make the opponent feel mounting pressure. Closing her eyes slightly, Alice softly whispered, "You're late." That brief phrase foretold the arrival of a new force that would change the situation. At that moment, a wave of dark purple power swept across the arena. A mysterious young man appeared amidst the siege, activating the skill Grave of Swords, signaling an impending storm. His face was cold, his bright purple eyes piercing through everything. Without introduction, just that gaze caused the entire battlefield to freeze for a moment. A true warrior had arrived. From the ground, black sword spikes tore through space, piercing the assassin army in an instant. Blood splattered as proof of the presence of someone who struck without mercy. Yomo was extremely shocked. His once confident face changed color as the opponent he had underestimated suddenly counterattacked fiercely and precisely. A pure white figure stood amidst the spilled blood, steady and motionless. Their speed was so fast no one could react. One move, 3 enemies fell. Teresa exclaimed joyfully, her eyes shining brightly as she saw Kang Jinhyuk appear just in time, like a miracle amid the crisis. Jinhyuk approached the injured Yuzeong, not forgetting to taunt with sharp words. His gaze was both cold and evoked an absolute sense of safety. Despite severe injuries, Teresa spoke up to defend Yuzeong. She believed her friend was not weak. The new enemy was truly too strong. Her words made Jinhyuk momentarily silent. Without another word, Jinhyuk raised his hand and twirled his middle finger in the air, a familiar sign whenever he prepared to start a massacre. He casually pointed at the enemy troops, clearly declaring, "All of them except us are bad guys." His simple voice was filled with murderous intent. Immediately after the declaration, 2 figures shot out like lightning. The pressure radiating from their leap showed they were summoned teammates coming to support Jinhyuk. In midair, the 2 tumbled through iron nets like death dancers. One shouted excitedly, the other briefly said, "They're strong." Jinhyuk just stood watching with a slight smile, as if already knowing the battle's outcome. Amidst cold and deadly slashes, the twins charged into the battlefield at an invisible speed. Their spinning moves created sharp blades of light that cut through enemy ranks, their screams echoing throughout the great hall. Faced with the unexpectedly overwhelming power, the villainous leader gritted his teeth and admitted that the situation had turned. The appearance of elite warriors made him lose confidence in maintaining the initiative, forcing him to consider a strategic retreat. Just as the thought of fleeing flashed, a sudden stab pierced straight into his chest, leaving him gasping, eyes wide in shock. Blood spurted from his mouth in extreme shock. He had not anticipated the finishing blow. He staggered, unable to believe what was happening. His distorted face showed astonishment and terror. The once arrogant leader was now the defeated, speechless. In pain and losing control, he screamed in despair. Clenching his wound, he still tried to stand, refusing to accept defeat easily despite bleeding profusely. Kang Jinhyuk approached with icy eyes, called out the opponent's name Yomo, and delivered sharp taunts. He emphasized Yomo's trivial role, not the mastermind he had deluded himself to be. With a slight swing of his hand, Jinhyuk ended the fight with a clean sweep. He didn't bother to look back, leaving Yomo to collapse behind him. To Jinhyuk, this was just a boring cleanup on the battlefield. Yomo's subordinates stood frozen in panic. Witnessing their revered leader fall quickly, confusion overwhelmed them as their faith was shattered in an instant. The twins needed no second command. As soon as Jinhyuk gave the order, they immediately reacted, shooting into the air like living arrows, ready to unleash fury on the fleeing remnants. The battle ended with a thunderous strike. Jinhyuk used his giant spear as a full stop, slamming it into the ground amid the defeated enemy's screams, leaving a reverberation that shook the entire combat space. Yuzeong knelt amid the aftermath, his eyes bitter as he looked at the teammate who had just finished off the enemy with a single blow. In his heart echoed the painful truth: the ultimate skill he had trained so hard for was defeated in an instant. Clenching his teeth in helpless anger, Yuzeong's trembling fist tightened. Though not weak himself, the power gap between him and the other was clearly an unreachable abyss. Yuzeong's hand trembled in despair as he gripped the sword hilt, his heart heavy with the question, how much more must he strive to catch up to that person? Before him stood Jinhyuk, a teammate whose power far exceeded the norm. In the cold light surrounding him, Jinhyuk silently turned his back, like an impenetrable wall that Yuzeong had yet to reach. Around were scattered corpses, not a single sound remained. The battle was over, and the attacking side was completely crushed in the fury unleashed by the defenders. Jinhyuk gently placed his hand on the heads of the twin children with a satisfied smile, praising, "Well done." He instructed them to leave first to handle the remaining tasks, not forgetting to warn them to be careful of traps. A female swordsman suddenly realized the true identity of the twins, her eyes wide with astonishment, but Jinhyuk calmly confirmed, "They are new employees of my company." In a hidden corner, Kim Jae-tae's gaze grew somber. He silently observed everything unfolding, his mind troubled by feelings of defeat and the overwhelming presence of Jinhyuk. In front of him was the one once considered the main force, now kneeling, motionless. The scene was like a cold shower to his pride, making the silence even heavier. Jinhyuk approached calmly and asked Kim Jae-tae what he planned to do next. He reminded him, to get through this maze, players usually take at least 20 days, like a sarcastic test. Not missing the chance to mock, Jinhyuk smirked. He called spending 20 days a luxury only for beginners, leaving Kim Jae-tae speechless. The couple Teresa and Alice watched Kim Jae-tae's retreating figure with curiosity. "What's wrong with him?" "Don't know," they replied casually, unconcerned. Jinhyuk quickly shifted attention to the next plan. With a confident smile, he introduced his small creatures, those who would help open the way into the royal tomb in less than an hour. Alice glanced at the new creatures, especially the sleek black mascot cradled in her arms. "You've gathered quite a lot recently," she remarked, while Teresa smiled delightedly. "So cute." Calm Jinhyuk gave a decisive order to end the joke and requested the spirit beasts to lead the way to the royal tomb. The spirit beasts immediately responded, ready to carry out the command. On the cold ground lay enemy corpses scattered, bloodied, and with a deadly atmosphere. One of them seemed dead, but something was unusual. One of the enemies presumed dead suddenly opened his eyes, quietly observing Jinhyuk's group, revealing survival and scheming behind his gaze. At the magnificent headquarters of Guild China, where power and resources converge, an undercurrent was about to erupt among the forces. Inside the office, a calm hand flipped through important documents. The latest news was carefully reviewed, not missing a single detail. Shouting, one of the senior leaders of Guild China and an A-ranker, was focused on processing the flood of information related to the latest upheavals in the tower. Stepping out to the large glass window, Shouting pondered. It had been exactly 24 hours since Liao Wei and Namgung Cheon entered the tower. She began to worry about the prolonged, unusual silence. Shouting's sharp gaze swept across the city. A flicker of alertness flashed in her eyes, the instinct of an experienced person signaling something was wrong. Amid the bustling city, the beep of traffic lights sounded. People casually crossed the crowded intersection, unaware of the approaching danger. Among the peaceful crowd, laughter and conversations went on as usual, but behind the calm was a storm silently gathering, waiting for a chance to erupt. With a suspicious look, Shouting wondered if the people truly understood the truth hidden behind the false peace enveloping the current world. Inside the giant tower, reality was torn apart to reveal the terrifying fragility of the world, a world no longer inhabited by the highest-level players. Shouting quietly turned away, keeping all her chaotic thoughts buried beneath a calm exterior. The worry continued to grow in her heart. She skimmed through the pile of confidential documents on the table, temporarily reassuring herself that there was still no need to cause public panic, even though things might already be out of control. Inside the tomb, the elemental spirit trembled, mustering all its remaining energy to open a secret door that had been hidden for centuries. The door leading into the royal tomb finally opened. Under the mysterious light, the spirits darted forward amid a resounding bang, marking the beginning of a major event. Faced with the surging power, Jinhyuk, Teresa, and Alice stood firm, their eyes tense and fixed ahead. There was no way back. They had stepped into the heart of all challenges. Inside the royal tomb, ablaze with piles of gold and silver, Alice sternly warned, anyone greedy enough to touch the treasure would bring upon themselves an irreparable disaster. The system confirmed the rule: only one treasure could be chosen. Anyone who violated this would suffer the curse of the kings, a punishment from which there was no escape. Pointing at the black bell, Jinhyuk calmly explained, awakening it was the key to leaving the maze. But that choice must come with an appropriate price. Standing before the massive treasure in the royal tomb, Kim Jae-tae skeptically asked, is solving the maze really that easy? Showing his caution toward things that seemed simple. Jinhyuk replied nonchalantly, telling Jae-tae that if he kept grumbling, he could just ring the bell to end it. However, a look of suspicion flashed in Jinhyuk's eyes. He muttered that the item he was searching for had to be somewhere around here. As he was investigating, an unusual feeling made him stop. From the stone tunnel entrance, a masked man in black suddenly appeared, breaking the silence. He glared furiously and warily, shouting, "Who are you people?" as if refusing to accept any intruders. Kim Jae-tae immediately drew his sword, his gaze icy. He questioned, a survivor, instinctively reacting to the possibility that an enemy from the previous battle remained. At once, the masked man pulled out a pair of blue scrolls from his cloak, moving efficiently and with clear preparation. It was a sign that he had not yet given up on his mission. That man, Liao Wei, summoned the skill, Early Spring, using a special scroll. Magical characters glowed as the ancient painting was unfurled and a hazy spatial portal gradually took shape before him. Jin Hyuk immediately became alert, his eyes flashing with suspicion. A teleportation gate, he thought, realizing the situation had gone beyond expectations. This was not just a mere survivor. The scroll-shaped spatial gate radiated a brilliant purple light, emitting a violently cracking energy as if about to tear apart the space. Something extremely dangerous was approaching. Streams of energy danced around the first figures to appear. A silver-haired man and his subordinates gradually stepped out from the fractured space, ready to intervene. From the other side of the gate, a group of fully armed warriors surged forth in a flash of brilliant purple lightning, led by a mysterious elder with the aura of a ruler, spreading an uneasy feeling throughout the royal tomb. The old man with a silver beard, Moyong-su, coldly received bad news from his subordinate, all of Blood Shadow, and their leader had been wiped out. Without bothering to hide his contempt, he concluded that those mutants were useless and not to be trusted. Despite being scolded, Liao Wei maintained a calm expression, trying to hide his emotions. Under his superior's gaze, he accepted praise as nothing more than an obligatory burden. Kang Jinhyuk stepped forward to face Moyong-su with a provocative attitude. He mocked the fact that his opponent had used a teleportation gate just to deal with someone so insignificant like him, and didn't forget to tease that this action would get the old man in trouble with his superiors. In response to Jinhyuk's taunt, Moyong-su paid little attention. He calmly opened a box containing a strange stone emitting a sinister purple glow, revealing preparations for something dangerous. A blindfolded warrior stepped forward, weapon ready. Moyong-su coldly revealed that the management could not see inside this maze, a completely separate place, his own domain. With a voice hissing through clenched teeth, Moyong-su declared his true ambition: if he killed everyone, there would be no one left to report. His calmness turned into a cold, murderous intent as the purple gem was thrown up. The old man crushed the great transformation marble with his teeth, and immediately his body began to transform. His body swelled abnormally in purple smoke, heavy footsteps echoing throughout the tomb. Amid fierce roaring, Moyong-su completed his transformation. Bulging muscles and bloodshot eyes, he declared all his stats had doubled for 1 hour, ready to crush his enemies. The massive mana radiating from Moyong-su stunned the others. In the blink of an eye, both warriors were pushed back, unable to react to the terrifying pressure closing in. Under the overwhelming pressure, Medusa joined the fight. She sneered provocatively, her eyes blazing as she cast a spell. Though considered a tool, she was still a being capable of countering any threat. The dazzling light from Alice's spell stunned her, bewildered by an unusual phenomenon never seen before. Jin Hyuk immediately intervened, shouting at Alice and warning that if she caused chaos here, the whole group could get into serious trouble, a clear order to keep the battle under control. At the same time, Moyong-su's extermination order thundered down, and the ninja-clad assassins immediately charged in, beginning an uncompromising battle. Under enemy pressure, Teresa worriedly exclaimed that the number of foes was too great, but Jin Hyuk smiled mysteriously, hinting at a surprising counterplan. Without hesitation, Teresa proposed a bold solution: call their own reinforcements. She unleashed a summoning skill, paving the way for a counterattack. In heroic light, 5 giant spirits representing the elements appeared behind Jin Hyuk. They switched to battle mode, ready to crush all enemies. With a cold smile, Jin Hyuk gave a brief but powerful order: charge. His summoning command officially ignited the full-scale battle. The elite army from the spirit realm responded to the order, flooding the battlefield like a torrent. At the same time, the Murim side shouted, "Show them the power of martial arts." Amid the chaos, Teresa and her companions stopped to observe. They realized this battle did not require their direct intervention. Everything was already in the hands of the elite forces. Meanwhile, Moyong-su, now having used the transformation gem, slammed down hard, preparing to unleash his full, terrifying power to turn the tide. A violent explosion sounded as Moyong-su's giant body crashed down like a meteor, shattering the floor with an impact that sent debris flying, marking the start of a fierce confrontation. Without missing a beat, Moyong-su sprang up like a fierce tiger, his eyes full of murderous intent aimed directly at Jin Hyuk, who stood calmly among the treasure as if anticipating everything. Roaring angrily, he unleashed the ultimate skill, wall-shattering fist, a punch with power to crush everything, demonstrating the full strength amplified by the great transformation marble. The punch demolished the entire floor, creating a pillar of light piercing through space, shaking the air and scattering debris like a battlestorm erupting at the maze's center. In a frenzy from being ignored, Moyong-su roared venomously, unleashing a powerful punch toward Jin Hyuk with contemptuous words, considering his opponent an arrogant fool toying with him. However, Jin Hyuk moved like a ghost, lightly dodging the side strike. Instead of counterattacking, he focused on observing and reading the movements, which only enraged Moyong-su more. After repeatedly missing his attacks, Moyang-soo roared, demanding Jin Hyuk fight properly. But the opponent remained silent as if waiting for something or someone to speak first. At that moment, Jin Hyuk's eyes sparkled as he discovered what he needed. A muttered word caused Moyang-soo to freeze. His whole body stiffened as he realized the danger. Jin Hyuk didn't need to attack, just standing before his opponent left him speechless. He smiled lightly, mocking, "What's wrong? Lost your voice?" as if flipping the psychological balance in the confrontation. Jin Hyuk's answer lay in his hand, a dangerous artifact glowing intensely. He raised the horn, his mouth full of implication, making Moyang-soo realize it was the Horn of Despair, the chaotic treasure of floor 25. Jin Hyuk smiled confidently as he saw the old man truly recognize the treasure in his hand, the Horn of Disaster. His eyes gleamed with triumph as if placing a decisive piece on the life and death chessboard. A brief but pressure-filled explanation was revealed. The first 3 blows of the horn would summon terrible calamities, but on the 4th, absolute luck would come to the user. The old man gritted his teeth, sneering with contempt, thinking Jin Hyuk was playing a trick. He had never been subdued by empty threats. Roaring sarcastically, he doubted anyone's survival if they dared summon 3 disasters in this enclosed space. He firmly stated that Jin Hyuk's scheme would not shake him. Without replying verbally, Jin Hyuk acted immediately, bringing the horn to his lips, taking a deep breath, preparing to blow. Every movement contained unwavering determination. A deep BWOM echoed throughout the hall. Jin Hyuk officially used the Horn of Despair. A wave of magical power burst forth, signaling the start of an irreversible event. The old man was startled, his panic unmistakable as he witnessed the scene before him. His expression shifted from confidence to horror in an instant. A system notification appeared coldly, like the scythe of death. The first despair has arrived. Cold sweat rolled down the old man's forehead as he realized the situation was out of control. Then, as if stepping out of a nightmare, a giant creature gradually took shape, the fear made real. The old man no longer looked majestic but merely a man facing an impending disaster. From the deep darkness, the first creature of the tomb, the black scorpion, the first disaster, rose. The nightmare had just been unleashed, and the summoner still stood there, coldly observing. The giant tail of Black Seed appeared menacingly, carrying a deadly red light, sweeping across the space like a death strike powered to the maximum. The tail swing struck down like a falling meteor, sending the whole group flying amid a horrific explosion. Screams mixed with dust and dazzling light. Amid the chaos, soldiers and debris flew everywhere in the dazzling light from the treasure, enemies blown away by the shockwave from the first attack. Teresa turned around in panic, her eyes quickly scanning the scattered crowd. While fleeing, she could not find Alice anywhere. Jisoo shouted tensely, forcing Teresa to prioritize her own life as death was breathing down their necks. The system suddenly announced, "Battlefield selection function has been activated." A layer of light barrier immediately enveloped Teresa and Jisoo, separating them from danger. The old martial artist roared angrily, veins bulging on his neck. He could not believe the young man had caused this disaster, and was making everything spiral out of control. While the battlefield trembled, Jin Hyuk stood calmly, facing the old man's fury. A gentle blue light radiated from behind him, containing something beyond understanding. In the perilous space, Jin Hyuk only smiled lightly when questioned. Behind him, Alice in her water elemental form appeared alongside a shimmering winged creature, marking the start of an even greater plan being deployed. With a powerful leap, Jin Hyuk shot up like a white lightning bolt. The counterattack plan had officially begun, and he had no intention of stopping it, just one strike. The old master roared furiously, his muscular arm gripping the glowing sword tightly, rushing forward like thunder, determined to stop the disaster Jin Hyuk had awakened. Without hesitation, he launched a deadly jump, slashing down on the giant scorpion, raising its claws high, creating a resounding explosion that shattered the ground. Despite his formidable spirit, the old general was trapped between giant pincers, the red light from the monster's chitin armor radiating like a deadly warning. In panic, the old man shouted desperately, calling Jin Hyuk a madman, but all warnings were meaningless before that resolute will. Without hesitation, Jin Hyuk continued to blow the second horn, letting everything around descend into chaos, the beginning of the next summoning. Along with the deep resonant sound spreading through the space, 2 new entities, the blazing burner and the armored warrior, descended amid gold and ruins, opening the curtain for the second desperate wave. A close-up of the old man's face, eyes wide and trembling, sweat streaming down his face, he realized he had truly fallen into an inescapable abyss. A giant mouth from the black earth opened wide, ready to swallow everything whole. The second calamity predator beneath the mud had appeared, plunging the space into silence. Sharp spiked tentacles lunged like venomous snakes, tearing through space, creating an unstoppable deadly threat to anyone left alive. In the chaos, the martial artist swung whirlwind slashes, trying to protect those caught in the tentacle trap. Cries of pain echoed across the battlefield. Amid the chaos, a member of the Chinese faction shouted Moyong Su's name in despair as he was tightly wrapped by giant tentacles, dragged straight into the monster's irresistible mouth. No one could intervene in time. The sharp tentacles from Predator beneath the mud struck down directly, piercing armor and victim's body, blood splattering across the stone floor. A survivor collapsed to the ground, painfully struggling to get up amid the devastated battlefield while the giant tentacles continued sweeping through as if to swallow everything whole. A scream tore through the air, Liao Wei echoed from a remaining teammate, his face pale with utter shock as he witnessed the tragedy unfolding before his eyes. Meanwhile, the seasoned swordsman was straining to slash through the tentacles, issuing a decisive order. They must regroup and seize the horn from Kang Jinhyuk before things spiral out of control. The other man still didn't fully understand the intent, frowning in confusion as he asked again. But the only answer was an angry shout, "You fool!" The truth was revealed when Kang Jinhyuk calmly raised the horn, the very object that was the source of the calamities raining down on them, and he did so with a provocative half-smile. A large sword was thrown through the air along with a biting remark, "Take it, though it's a bit wasted on someone like you." That was the last chance to change the situation. A clear order rang out with commanding spirit. At all costs, the one entrusted with the sword must bring back the horn, or else be buried with the rest of the team. The heavy sword landed with a cold metallic sound, ready to be swung to begin a desperate counterattack against the one who had manipulated the battlefield with a smile. The blade shone with brilliant golden light. The man gripped it tightly and raised it in a ready stance. His resolute gaze and concise reply, "Understood," showed he was ready to enter a life-or-death battle. From the blazing flames, a fire dragon creature roared and erupted amid the ruined scene. Shattered tree stumps and scorched earth bore witness to its destructive presence. Two giant beings, a fire-clad beast and a colossal golem, charged together to fight the newly appeared black monster. The thunderous explosions made the entire tomb shake violently. Amid the chaotic battlefield, the sword swung in a spiral of blue light. The old man unleashed a wind-splitting slash, breaking apart the tentacles entangling his comrades, while his sharp counterattack rebounded toward the monsters. Kang Jinhyuk moved like a phantom. In a flash, multiple clones appeared, swinging swords in unison, creating a whirlwind of slashes that swept away everything in their path. The old man stopped, gripping his sword hilt tightly. He knew well this was not yet the time to act. He needed to wait for the right moment, when all the pieces fell into their destined places. The old man's sharp gaze drilled into Kang Jinhyuk. He understood, once Jinhyuk started blowing the horn, he would not stop until he achieved his ultimate goal. Memories of an old prophecy flooded back. 4 blasts of the horn, and great fortune would descend on the last one. The old man gritted his teeth, realizing Jinhyuk was rushing toward that finish line. No longer hesitating, the old man swept forward like a raging storm. That final fortune must be mine. The scream echoed in his mind as he charged with all his might to stop it. But from afar, Kang Jinhyuk, with a calm gaze, had already anticipated this. He glanced at the sword rushing toward him as if every move was already in his hands. Kang Jinhyuk leapt onto the highest golden platform, gripping the horn of destiny in his hand. Though rumors said it brought fortune, he silently emphasized all was just perspective and viewpoint determined fate. While everyone saw the horn as a source of blessing, Jinhyuk laughed, stepping to the summit, hand on the altar. For him, true fortune was when others fell into despair. The third beam of light from the horn shot up into the sky, awakening a magical vortex atop the tower. The system coldly announced, "The third wave of despair is approaching." The air shattered into sparkling purple fragments, dazzling magic exploded. A spatial gate was forming, signaling the arrival of an entity not belonging to this world. The warriors in the Golden Hall held their breath as the ground trembled. A giant monster with storm-like limbs manifested before them, leaving Melina and her comrades stunned. From above, the giant shadow gradually took shape. A faceless being wrapped in death lightning stood proudly at Jinhyuk's feet as if he were the one who summoned it. Tulpa, the third calamity of the ancient tomb, finally descended. The system confirmed the appearance of this death entity and simultaneously opened an inescapable challenge. Tulpa swung its arm covered in purple energy, its body blazing like a demonic flame. Every movement created energy waves that made the entire space shudder. The death lightning swept fiercely toward the warriors. One screamed in pain as he was blasted away, his body twisting midair, proving the unstoppable destructive power. A warning shout rang out, "Get out. If hit, you will vanish instantly." Before the sentence ended, two warriors touched the deathly light and began disintegrating like dust in midair. Kang Jinhyuk unleashed a sharp slash from a high position, a brilliant purple energy swirling wide like a death crescent, cutting through the air and aiming straight at the opponent below. The blade cut through space, slammed hard into a wall, and Jinhyuk's whole body was thrown back by the recoil. Despite being knocked back, he did not drop the horn. Jinhyuk's hand slowly relaxed, his eyes calculating something. It seemed he deliberately let the horn fall, not by accident but as a strategic move. With a slight smile and confident gaze, Jinhyuk whispered as if he had completed all that was needed. All subsequent developments were now under his control. A loud explosion sounded as the horn fell onto the battlefield. Amid dust and dazzling light, it collided with a sharp sound that caught everyone's attention. A hand quick as lightning grabbed the rolling horn, firmly grasping the fateful item amid chaos as if accepting a new role in this game of chess. As that strong hand clenched the horn, Liao Wei's eyes suddenly tensed. His heartbeat echoed in his chest. He was torn between orders and intuition. The white-haired swordsman shouted excitedly upon seeing the horn picked up, demanding it be brought to him so he could perform the decisive blow, believing victory was near. But Liao Wei stood still, turning his back to the commander. His eyes betrayed hesitation amid the ruined scene and rampaging monsters. In a moment of angry confrontation, the swordsman hissed at Liao Wei. Why did he want to use such a cursed item himself? The question was not just doubt but suspicion about his true intentions. After a strong blow sent him flying into rubble, Jinhyuk calmly propped himself up. With his characteristic lazy gaze, he smiled and thought quietly that perhaps some good fortune was coming, though he did not yet know what it was. Amid the tense atmosphere, Liao Wei looked straight at the leader with determined eyes. In a quiet but firm voice, he reaffirmed his long-standing loyalty and declared, this time, he would choose what he wanted for himself. Witnessing Liao Wei's unexpected action, Jinhyuk immediately widened his eyes. A wave of unease surged in that moment, as if he realized something terrible was about to happen. Immediately after, Jinhyuk shouted loudly, trying to stop Liao Wei before it was too late. He struggled to stand up, panicked as he realized the horn was about to be blown, a move that could lead to unforeseeable consequences. But it was already too late. Liao Wei decisively raised the horn high into the sky and blew a resounding blast throughout the great hall. Strong swirling sound waves emitted, engulfing the space in a fierce blue aura. A system notification appeared. Fortune is approaching. Liao Wei shouted wildly in excitement, eagerly awaiting the fortune to pour forth as promised by the mysterious horn. At the same time, in the royal tomb, a new cold announcement echoed, "Peace has returned." A soft clinking sound rang out as glasses fell, signaling that something had just been awakened. Another figure, clearly not aligned with Jinhyuk's side, showed obvious horror. He screamed loudly, as if witnessing something beyond comprehension, something that should never have happened. In a modern room with large glass windows, a man stood silently looking out at the scene outside. Before him was a sky dyed red and unusual beams of light, symbols of a force beyond humanity. He could only utter, "Oh my God!" The city's usual sunset scene was shattered by abnormal signs, dust, fierce light, and sky distortion. A disaster was about to descend, and the whole world seemed to hold its breath before the impending storm. In a moment when the air was gradually settling, the ground suddenly shook violently. A blazing purple energy spiraled deep into the city's space, terrifying everyone. Under the red glow of traffic lights, witnesses froze, only able to retreat in panic as the supernatural phenomenon engulfed everything. From the void torn apart by magic, three terrifying creatures with nightmare forms emerged. Sharp jaws, glowing red spiked armor, and darkness wrapped like a death cloak, the three great calamities officially appeared. The world was now swept into an irreversible chain of catastrophic upheavals. In the devastated aftermath of the battle, a young man dressed in black sat down on the ground, holding a long staff. In front of him, two women stepped forward amid the tense atmosphere. He softly called out, breaking the silence that had enveloped them. The blonde woman in white armor turned her head, but the young man's reply was a gentle reminder, "Save your strength, Saintess." It seemed he understood that another battle was coming and that preserving energy was crucial. He tilted his head back to drink a vial of recovery potion while calmly explaining the situation. "Only when time runs out or he is defeated will they be freed from this place." At the bottom of the screen, the countdown clock showed exactly 5 minutes and 21 seconds remaining. The Saintess could not hide her worry. She shouted, questioning how the man could remain so calm. Her question struck at the core. "Aren't you worried about Jinhyuk?" The man smirked faintly. He uttered two words as if it were ridiculous, "Worried." Then he repeated, "Worried about that guy?" He chuckled softly, causing the Saintess to step back in confusion. That expression was not only confidence but also absolute faith in Jinhyuk, whom he mentioned with admiration mixed with a hint of sarcasm. Looking up at the confused woman before him, he asserted, "After all this time together, she still doesn't understand? Everything that happens is part of Jinhyuk's plan, as if the whole world is a chessboard he controls." His face grew serious. He affirmed that Jinhyuk designed everything in ways no one could imagine. And even without witnessing it firsthand, he was certain everything is currently unfolding exactly according to that person's plan. The girl, still confused, caught the potion bottle he tossed to her. "There's no room for us to intervene," he continued in a low voice. "So just sit tight and recover your strength." The distance between them was now not only physical but also perceptual. As the man continued drinking the recovery potion, the Saintess stood silently, clutching the bottle, as if trying to understand where that unwavering faith in Jinhyuk came from. The countdown finally reached 0, and immediately the system announced the deactivation of the Select Battlefield function. The spatial shield shattered like glass, freeing the two, the Cold Man and the Holy Night Woman. They stood amidst a magnificent treasure inside an ancient tomb, but the scene was far from peaceful. A panicked scream echoed from afar as the enemies realized that the three great disasters, the terrifying monsters, had completely vanished. Faced with this harsh truth, one of the enemies screamed wildly, clutching his head as if unable to bear the panic and crushing defeat descending upon them. A comrade behind him gritted his teeth, eyes full of worry. That expression was clear evidence of the rising chaos, as their plan was completely overturned and no one understood what had just happened. In the moment of chaos, both the man and the Holy Knight were also surprised. They turned their heads simultaneously, looking toward the strange voice that had just sounded from above. A giant arm with black claws and glowing red light appeared, carrying a system decree. "Disturbers of the royal tomb will be punished." A new destructive power had been summoned. The image of that giant creature appeared inside a glowing cube suspended in space. Everyone stood silently, bewildered and shaken by the truth. This was an unprecedented outbreak. The next announcement sounded, explaining that the tomb's owner was granting a chance for redemption. A purple light gate opened, a passage leading directly to where the three disasters were wreaking havoc in the world. Old Man Liaowei had to hold tightly onto a man who was thrashing wildly like a madman. The man shouted in despair, insisting that his city was burning down and he could not stay here another minute. With a decisive yet sorrowful voice, the old man stated the truth: "You won't be able to do anything there." He also emphasized why the baton should have been handed to him earlier, because this tragedy could have been entirely avoided. In a critical moment, the strong old man activated the magical weapon, Early Spring, creating a purple glowing portal. In his hand was a power card, opening a fateful path amid chaos and destruction. A commanding shout rang out amid the dazzling light: "Those who are alive, carry the wounded and retreat immediately." The order was given not only with authority but also with the heartbreak of a commander forced to abandon the battlefield. While the light from the portal had not yet faded, the old man turned his head to look up at the glowing image in midair, a giant creature with bizarre tentacles rampaging in another world. His eyes were heavy with burden and torment. A silent remorse rose within him as he wondered if he had been the one to blow the final horn back then. Would things have been different? Could that disaster have been prevented from reaching Murim land? His sharp eyes blazed with anger and determination. He needed no words. His gaze alone conveyed regret, fury, and vigilance about the spreading consequences. At another gate, the mastermind quietly stepped out into the mountainous forest. Despite failing to eliminate Kang Jinhyuk, he still believed fate was turning in his favor. A return with new schemes. The city scene appeared with violent sounds. A strike like a meteor crashed down, destroying vehicles and buildings, signaling the arrival of a destructive force beyond control. The giant monster revealed its true form, jagged teeth, a body full of tentacles, roaring fiercely as citizens fled in panic. Fear engulfed the entire city, being swallowed whole. The SBX television station building was now just a pile of rubble. A huge crack ran across the facade, like a dark mark left by the monster after its brutal attack. At the same time, other giant creatures, scorpion-like monsters with blood-stained claws, swept through everything. The streets became a battlefield where screams and dust mixed with sounds of destruction. Kang Jinhyuk silently looked up at the virtual screen showing an image of a modern city sinking into ruin. The blazing red sunset dyed the sky, reflecting off collapsed skyscrapers, a sign that one of the three great disasters had struck the real world. Jinhyuk's hand clenched tightly, knuckles prominent under the soft red light. He was trying to suppress his emotions, a mix of anger, worry, and determination rising as he witnessed the consequences of what was about to happen outside. The small creatures under Jinhyuk's command, including Yam and familiar spirit beasts showed concern as they saw their master walking silently. His ominous silence made all nearby creatures cautious. Teresa was startled when she noticed Jin Hyuk approaching the glowing teleportation gate. Without explanation, he prepared to step in as if already accepting the consequences of his next action. Kim Jae-tae called out Jin Hyuk's name in panic, trying to stop his teammate from making a reckless and solitary decision. But Jin Hyuk continued forward into the gate, the purple light flickering as if swallowing his entire body. Contrasting with the previous chaos, a modern office appeared in absolute silence. Swivel chairs, scattered papers, and sunset light streaming through glass windows evoked remnants before the storm. Suddenly, a violent explosion shattered the glass and all the interior inside. The force of the strike sent everything in the office flying, signaling that an attack had begun. A female warrior charged straight out of the rubble, battle intent clear in her eyes. She gripped her massive weapon tightly, her hair flying among the debris, ready to confront whatever opponent awaited. Another male warrior immediately activated the skill, Aura Armor, an energy shield enveloping his body, causing the killing intent around him to erupt. The air trembled before his fury and resolute will to die. The monster with blazing red pincers swung brutally, creating a collision like a meteor strike. The ground cracked open, rocks scattered, marking the start of a life-or-death battle between humanity and disaster. A tremendous impact smashed the ground as the giant monster descended from above, causing the surrounding space to shake violently. Amid the dusty haze, a glowing warrior charged forward to resist, carrying a fragile hope amid despair. The ground cracked beneath the survivors as they struggled to rise from the rubble. A female warrior lay motionless, but her eyes still burned with determination, her large spear lying beside her as if she had not yet let go. Despite blood and sweat streaming down her face, the woman forced a smile, bitter in pain. She asked in a sharp tone, as if death was near but her pride had never wavered. In the distance, a rumbling sound signaled the approach of the giant beast. In panic, some had yet to retreat, while she, with all remaining strength, planted her spear into the ground, ready to face it. She staggered forward, legs trembling but still trying to stand firm. In her heart was only one thought: to buy time, even just a little, until Namgung Cheon arrived. Her hands gripped the spear shaft tightly, each knuckle clenched as if trying to hold onto the last hope. The sunset light shining down made that moment even more tragic. She faced the approaching giant monster without a trace of fear. In her mind echoed one thought: just hold it for a second, even 1 second, and the situation could be turned around. As the monster's strike descended, her eyes widened, ready to receive the fatal blow. Time seemed to freeze in that moment of extreme tension. Suddenly, a blue light tore through the air. A sword slashed through and shattered the attack. A mysterious warrior appeared, standing between her and the enemy, electricity bursting over the foe's body. Kang Jin-hyuk turned to ask Yuzeong calmly but firmly, could he hold the giant scorpion for 10 minutes? That voice was not an order but the beginning of a counterattack. Yuzeong stared at the enemy before him, his eyes silent but filled with iron determination, as if he had already calculated everything in his mind. A slight smirk appeared on Yuzeong's lips, a half-smile full of challenge, a clear signal that he was not pressured but excited by the upcoming trial. Facing the giant scorpion roaring in fury, Yuzeong calmly repeated Jin-hyuk's request, 10 minutes. Without hesitation, he swung his weapon behind him, activating the skill Brandish, declaring loudly amid the chaotic battlefield, I will destroy it. The skill Battlefield Selection was immediately activated, pulling both warrior and monster into a distinct space reserved solely for this life-or-death battle. As the separate battle was about to begin, at another location, a mysterious warrior clad in white armor appeared and approached, suspiciously asking if the opponent was Kang Jin-hyuk. Jin-hyuk turned his head but remained silent. The unexpected question did not surprise him. On the contrary, his calm reaction made the atmosphere even tenser. No longer avoiding, Jin-hyuk smiled confidently and answered in a half-joking tone, why do you think? Of course, to gain experience. Meanwhile, at the front line, a brutal attack was unleashed with a purple energy wave, sweeping away all nearby enemies and causing the opposing forces to panic and scatter. One of them, unable to react in time, was caught by the purple whip and could only turn around in despair as death approached at an unstoppable speed. As the enemy launched an attack with dark energy whips, Teresa promptly activated the skill, Divine Blessing. Amid radiant light and holy aura emanating from her armor, she charged into the front line like a sacred arrow. Seeing civilians still fleeing in panic amid the ruins, Teresa lowered herself into a defensive stance. Her eyes sparkled with determination. She knew she had to hold the enemy back as long as possible to give the innocent a chance to escape. Facing her now was a demon clad in dark armor with oppressive momentum. Magical whips circled its body, carrying killing intent and dark power that enveloped the space, making the heavens and earth seem to hold their breath before the impending battle. Teresa breathed heavily, but her gaze remained unwavering. She told herself to confront the monster. Just buying a little more time could save another life. That was the greatest sacrifice she could offer at this moment. Faint cracks appeared on the dark creature's magical armor. A cracking sound echoed as a sign that the savage power inside that grotesque shell was about to be fully unleashed. Immediately after, jagged teeth and a monstrous mouth opened wide. The creature gave a sinister smile. It was not a joyful smile, but a brutal instinct ready to devour everything, darkening the surrounding space with killing intent. At the same time, purple tentacles from the enemy's body began to coil tightly. Its whole body trembled, energy accumulating, the pressure from its magic compressing as if preparing for a terrifying explosion. Then, with a resounding blast, a column of destructive energy was unleashed. The strike carried devastating power, twisting the sky and tearing the battlefield with a blazing purple death ray. Teresa immediately spun around, raising her shield to block. She summoned all her divine power to resist the demonic energy rushing at her with terrifying speed. Though her feet were firmly planted on the ground, she did not retreat. The sudden shock made Teresa widen her eyes. A strange twisting motion obscured her vision. The previous attack was not merely power but also a scheme. It was not over yet, and she was not allowed to fall. In a horrifying moment, civilians controlled by dark energy suddenly turned on each other, stabbing and slashing wildly as blood splattered everywhere. Darkness seemed to completely consume their reason. A cold system announcement sounded. Tulpa had infiltrated and corrupted human minds. The glowing red eyes and distorted expression of the transformed girl were clear evidence of loss of control. Surrounded by the corrupted, female knight, Teresa was shocked to see their bodies convulsing and deforming. The harsh truth became clear: they were being forced to transform into monsters. One victim had completed the transformation, with blood-red eyes and sharp claws, resembling a creature from hell. The presence of Tulpa had created new monsters in the heart of the city. The girl who once seemed harmless has now become the source of disaster. Her hair covers her face, her steps unsteady, but the most terrifying thing is the purple whip curling behind her, a weapon of darkness. The newly transformed creatures suddenly charged at Teresa from all sides. She immediately raised her sword to defend, the clash ringing sharply, signaling the start of a life-or-death battle. A monster lunged with the intent to bite, but Teresa counterattacked fiercely. The impact was so strong it cracked the creature's fangs, its eyes filled with confusion and pain. The little girl, now turned into a demon, screamed wildly as Teresa's sword pierced her. Blood gushed out, but the terror she unleashed was far from over. Teresa stood frozen, eyes wide in shock as the enemy's blood splattered on her face. The battle had now surpassed survival. It was a hellish catastrophe. Then from above, the most terrifying entity appeared. A giant monster, born from despair and hatred, roared madly, awakening the entire horde controlled by Tulpa. In the hazy purple smoke, the giant entity bared jagged teeth like blades, curling its lips into a sinister smile. Its smile was not only a sign of arrogance, but also a grim declaration of the impending disaster. Without a word, that smile revealed the doom about to befall the entire battlefield.